Mississippi State did play a spring game on Saturday. Brian Hadad was there, and these are the things that are true.
Well, one thing I will tell you is true. I think I was at the last Mississippi State spring game. I'll be totally honest with you. The way that it was run and the lack of the fact that, like you mentioned, not on television, but you can't even find highlights of this. It was obvious that they wanted to keep as much under wraps as they can in purposes of the portal. And I mean, I get it. I get it. But I was there. I was a little nervous there for a few minutes that we're about to see. You know, I saw a 0-0 spring game once before, and the season that followed wasn't much to write home about. But State was able to put some points. They were able to put some points on the board. But something funny if somebody else had showed up. I thought that the
what was the format?
It was just a scrimmage. Kind of evenly divided teams. They ran running clock. They basically ran 2 15-minute quarters with running clock, and that was it. It wasn't anything situational. Everybody took over on the 20 and started driving the football. I thought that from a defensive perspective, I feel that's where everybody wants to talk about, right? That's where the question marks are. First and foremost, to steal from someone here, they just look good on the hoof, right? They just look like an SEC defense this year that they did not last year. Like when you see the way the physicality they have this year, they look more like an SEC defense. So that's a good start, right? I thought that they were more aggressive. I don't have a whole lot of memory of last year's spring game, but I thought they were very vanilla on defense last year. This year they were more aggressive. When you do a scrimmage and they're not doing live stats, we just kind of divvy the stats up amongst who's there so we can keep up. I got charged with tackles for loss and sacks. I think State had 6 sacks and 7 tackles for loss in this game from all 3 levels. You had some defensive linemen breaking through. You had linebackers. They blitzed some safeties, and they were able to make some plays. I thought defensively, as much as you can in this scenario, they looked improved. Now, granted, they didn't have anywhere to go but up, right? I mean, that defense, it literally couldn't have been worse, could it? I don't think so. That being said, and this is the thing that Lebby has stressed over and over and over again, every time we've talked to him, is that State still has a lot of work to do on the offensive line. Now, they didn't have one team have the starting offensive line. You had a couple starters on one side and 3 on the other, whatever you want to do. But that offensive line is still a work in progress, and that's why State is currently hosting an offensive lineman from Virginia. He's on campus right now, one of their starting tackles. They'd like to be able to get him in the boat. They have a guy that they recruited out of JUCO here in Mississippi who ended up at Purdue. He redshirted last year, but they've recruited him to come back. He's back in the portal. They need some bodies there. I think they've got some decent pieces on the offensive line, but they need more depth. They need more competition there for sure. The most impressive player, I thought, was a guy who I would not expect to see much of this year, and that's the true freshman quarterback, Camario Taylor. And I know State fans are already, as I can already tell you, the first time Shapen throws a pick, they're going to be calling for this guy because they believe he's the future. And look, the talent is just obvious in everything that he does. Watching him in warm-ups, throwing 50 and 60-yard bombs off of his back foot, just flicking his wrist. He was throwing the football like I'd throw you a beer, and it was going 50 yards. He looks the part, for sure. But this is going to be Blake Shapen's team. I thought Shapen played pretty well. He missed a couple of deep throws, but by and large, he looked fine. He talked in the post game about he and Lebby have had conversations like you can't play the same way you've played the past few years. You've got to take better care of yourself. You've got to slide. You've got to avoid these big hits because if you do that, you can play the whole season, and they feel like they can be successful. Devon Booth looked good. I thought Fluff Buffwell looked good.
But that was a conversation they had a year ago also.
It is, and he didn't take it to heart. And I think getting hurt, I think he knows this is the last go-round. So I think he we'll see. It's when they blow the whistle and you put the pads on, sometimes that just goes out the window, and you do what you do.
And maybe the threat of Wally Pipp, too.
Well, I mean, that threat exists. I thought Cromenhawk looked okay. I mean, again, State's offensive line did not play well in this scrimmage. They just didn't. So he was under pressure at times. But you see the arm strength. He can move. I think he's a talented guy. I thought the running backs looked good, which we
Who's
expected.
the backup?
I think it's Cromanhawk to start. I won't be surprised if it's Camario by the end of the year, but we'll see. I mean, going into last year when they made the change when Chapin got hurt, I was sort of surprised that Van Buren was ahead of Parson, and you see how that all played out. We saw Van Buren. That was kind of we were leaving, going to the press conference, and Robbie and I were just talking, and he was like, "It was Michael Van Buren," and he was there. Again, I thought the running backs looked good. I thought Xavier Gayton, that's a guy we don't talk about a lot, but he was good. He looks good every time he carries the ball. Receivers, I mean, they spread the ball around. I thought Aiden Williams had a nice catch that was called back on a penalty, but he had a nice diving catch on a throw from Camaro Taylor. Ricky Johnson was probably the most consistent guy. He's not a transfer. Kind of odd to talk about that. I thought that, like I said, I mentioned Aiden Williams. I'm trying to remember if anybody else really stood out there as far as the receivers go. Not really. And then defensively, the player I was most impressed with is the transfer from EMCC, Tony Mitchell, former Alabama player, safety. He had 2 tackles for loss and a sack. He just looks like an SEC football player. And, I mean, there's just too many guys last year for State that you just look at me like, that guy doesn't look like an SEC football player. And now you've got more of that on this roster. So I didn't see anything that makes me think, oh, wow, they may really be a 6-7 win team, but I didn't see anything that makes me think they're going to be as bad as they were a year ago. I think they can be a little bit improved, and we'll see where that gets them.
You said Camario it's Camario and not Camario?
You know what? This is going to be a Quanzo Martin kind of thing. I don't really know. I've been saying Camario, and Robbie hasn't corrected me yet, and he would know, so we'll see how it goes.
Okay.
I could find out for sure.
So is that something where you're going to actually go to the trouble of finding out, or are you
This
going to
one
say,
I feel
I'll
like
call
I need
him
to know.
whatever I
Like,
want to call him?
how many times am I going to talk about Quanzo Martin, in my life? Not a lot. But this guy, I probably do need to know how to pronounce his name, considering I'll probably interview him at some point. So